a country with fewer people than the state of Maryland, spent around $220 billion to host an event that lasted just 29 days. Let that number sit for a second. 220 billion. To put it in scale, the World Cup before it in Russia cost somewhere near $11 to $13 billion. Brazil, 8 years earlier, spent roughly 15. South Africa in 2010, around 3 to 4 billion. And then a single Gulf state spent more than all of them combined, many times over for 1 month of football. Genuinely stop you. FIFA, the organization that actually owns the tournament, that licenses the matches and signs the global deals, walked away from that same 2022 cycle, having collected nearly $7.5 billion in revenue. The host paid $220 billion. The owner kept the profit. And right now, today, dozens of other nations are quietly lining up to do the exact same thing. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars just to apply, just for the chance to lose money on a scale most governments would never tolerate anywhere else. Isn't who lifts the trophy at the end. It's why the most powerful governments on earth are willing to bleed money like this, on purpose, knowing economists are warning them they may never see it again, because almost no host country genuinely expects to make its money back. They know. The studies are public. The crumbling stadiums from previous tournaments are sitting right there, visible, and they bid anyway aggressively, repeatedly, for years. That isn't a sports decision. That is a financial behavior, and it only starts to make sense once you understand what these countries are actually buying. Start with the money that's real, because there is real money here, staggering amounts of it. A modern World Cup is one of the largest commercial events the human species stages. The 2026 tournament, hosted across the United States, Mexico, and Canada, is projected to generate around $13 billion in revenue across its cycle, broadcasting rights alone. The deals that let television networks in nearly every country show the matches are expected to approach $4 billion. Sponsorship, every logo plastered across every banner and every pitch, adds another $2 to $3 billion on top. For roughly 1 month, the World Cup becomes the most watched event on Earth, pulling in billions of viewers across the globe. The commercial gravity of it is almost impossible to overstate. Quiet trap. And it's the one most people never notice. Almost none of that headline revenue actually flows to the host country. The broadcasting money, the sponsorship money, the licensing money that all belongs to FIFA. It collects it, it keeps it, and it carries it forward to fund the next tournament. The host country's income comes from a completely different, far messier, far less reliable set of streams. Tourists, hotel nights, restaurant tabs, taxi fares, local spending in the streets around the stadiums. And those numbers, it turns out, are dramatically smaller and far softer than the glossy bid documents ever promised. Really turns. Because while that income stays small, the spending grows colossal, and it sits almost entirely on the host's side of the ledger. Stadiums do not build themselves. A single modern World Cup standard stadium can cost anywhere from several $100 million to well over $1 billion. And FIFA's requirements are strict and non-negotiable. A minimum number of venues, a certain capacity, a precise standard, finished by a deadline that cannot move, no matter what. Brazil built or fully renovated 12 stadiums. South Africa spent over $3 billion on transportation, telecommunications, and stadiums combined. And the costs almost never stop at the buildings. They pull in airports, highways, rail lines, hotels, power grids, entire layers of a nation's infrastructure, all accelerated under the pressure of a clock that will not wait, directly to the most painful part of the whole story. Watch what happens the moment the final whistle blows. The fans go home, the broadcast trucks pack up, the journalists fly out, and the host is left holding a 90,000-seat stadium in a city that will never come close to filling it again. Brazil's Arena da Amazônia, built deep in the rainforest city of Manaus, cost over $300 million and hosted exactly 4 World Cup matches. 4. Afterward, it sat largely empty, draining millions of dollars a year just in maintenance and upkeep. Economists have a precise term for these structures. They call them white elephants assets, too expensive to use and too expensive to demolish. South Africa was left with gleaming stadiums that now host a tiny fraction of the crowds they were designed for, while taxpayers keep quietly paying to keep the lights on inside them. So a brutal pattern is forming. The owner keeps the profit, the host keeps the debt, the buildings become burdens, and yet the line of countries desperate to get in keeps getting longer every cycle. To understand why, you have to look closely at the one promise hosts lean on hardest and watch it quietly fall apart. Tourism. The pitch is always identical. The whole world will come, the world will spend, and the world will fall permanently in love with your country. And sometimes the fans do arrive in real numbers. But study after study has found the boost is far smaller than projected. And a big part of the reason is something economists call displacement. The football crowd shows up, but the regular tourists, the families on vacation, the business travelers who would have come anyway, they stay away. They're scared off by the crowds, the inflated prices, the chaos. One type of visitor quietly replaces another, and the net gain shrinks to a fraction of the headline. Researchers at Oxford examined decades of these mega events and found that nearly every single host blew straight through its budget. The promised windfall arrives again and again, smaller than advertised and later than anyone hoped. Problem for the past. Even now, in 2026, with the tournament spread across wealthy North American cities that already owned world-class stadiums and didn't need to build from scratch, the cracks are still showing. Host city hotels across the United States have reported bookings tracking below expectations. Several cities have quietly scaled back their planned fan festivals once the promised flood of spending failed to fully materialize. And running underneath all of it is FIFA's commercial machine, which routinely negotiates sweeping tax exemptions as a condition of hosting sales tax breaks on tickets, federal tax shields for itself and its affiliates, pulling millions in potential public revenue away from the very cities footing the enormous bill. So if the tourism is overstated, and the broadcast revenue belongs to FIFA, and the stadiums curdle into long-term liabilities, then we are right back to the only question that actually matters. What on earth are these governments truly paying for? The answer isn't sitting on any balance sheet. It's soft power. It is, quite simply, the most expensive advertisement a nation can possibly buy. For 1 month, you become the backdrop to the entire planet's attention. Every broadcast, every sweeping aerial shot of your skyline, every story filed by tens of thousands of visiting journalists, that is exposure no marketing budget on Earth could purchase directly at any price. A small Gulf state spends years as an unfamiliar name on a map, and then, for one tournament, transforms into a household word, a business hub, a destination, a recognized player on the global stage. Russia, in 2018, spent over $11 billion and deliberately used the event to project an image of openness and competence to a skeptical world, a calculated soft power strategy, as scholars later described it. The football itself was almost beside the point. The global audience was the real prize. Reframes those so-called losses completely. When a government spends $200 billion and loses most of it, it may not see that as a failure at all. It sees it the way a corporation sees a Super Bowl commercial, except the product being advertised is the entire country itself. The new airport stays, the new metro line stays, the global recognition stays, and the leadership gets to stand on the world stage in front of billions of people and declare, "We built this. We hosted the planet. We belong in the room with the powerful." That is political capital at home and pure prestige abroad, and neither will ever appear in a tourism report or a stadium revenue statement. That should sit genuinely uncomfortably with you, because it follows directly from that prestige. The entire logic only holds together if you happen to be the specific person making the decision. The politician who hosts the tournament collects all the prestige now in the spotlight while in office. The ordinary taxpayer who maintains the empty stadium pays the bill later for decades, long after that leader is gone. The benefits are concentrated, visible, and immediate. The costs are spread thin across millions of citizens and stretched across 30 years of maintenance budgets. That asymmetry, concentrated reward, diffused cost, is the true engine behind everything. It is exactly why the spending looks completely irrational from the outside, and yet feels perfectly, coldly rational from the inside. Host the World Cup because the math works out. They fight for it because the math was never the point. They are buying a single, fleeting moment of total global belonging paid for in concrete, steel, and debt, and justified by a return that lands mostly as feeling, image, and influence rather than profit. And the real bill comes due quietly, years after the lights have gone dark and most of the world has already forgotten which country even hosted. The tournament ends in a single, glorious night. The stadiums then sit dark for decades. And somewhere, in a quiet government office, a finance minister is already drafting the next bid, not because the numbers add up, but because they understand the most unsettling truth of all. The one thing more expensive than hosting the World Cup is admitting you never wanted to be seen at all.